really annoying plane!
It's really difficult to use the figures of noise levels provided by BAA because what they actually do is they record noise from the whole 24-hour clock. That includes night times when planes are not flying, but strangely it doesn't actually include the hour between 6 and 7 p.m. when Heathrow is the most busy. During this time, planes are taking off or landing up to once every 30 seconds. Now what you probably didn't know is having a new runway in another position slightly away from the airport will actually create whole new flight paths. Not only will the people around Heathrow be affected, but also people as far afield as North London and maybe even Romford will be affected by low-flying planes. As you can see in the background, there are people playing football. What you probably didn't know is aircraft noise can actually increase your risk of being unhealthy. What do I mean by this? I mean aircraft noise is a factor in developing coronary heart disease, stroke and hypertension, also known as high blood pressure. Now the EU Commission found 80 million people in Europe are exposed to exceeding levels of aircraft noise. That's a whole 20% of the European population. A third runway at Heathrow would produce the exact same amount of carbon dioxide as the whole country of Kenya. This is set to cost the economy £13 billion a year. Yo man, I'm gonna go on the swings because swings are awesome! What? Keep out? Oh no! Thanks Heathrow! Now this goes without saying, the runway is going to have to be built somewhere. It's going to be built on green space. As you just saw, Jim, he's not going to be able to swing on the swings anymore. How sad. Another problem, which I mentioned earlier, would be pollution. Worldwide, greenhouse emissions from aviation accounts for a whole 3% of worldwide carbon dioxide emissions. In the UK, this rises to a whole 13%. This makes the UK the second greatest producer of greenhouse emissions from avionics, after America. The proposed third runway is planned to be used predominantly for short-haul flights. Now, short-haul flights are actually the most polluting flights of all. A short-haul flight per passenger would be 259 grams per kilometre. Now, on a flight between London and Marseille in the south of France, which is about 1,000 kilometres, that would create 259 kilograms of carbon dioxide. Now you have to remember that's per passenger. On a plane full of about 200 people, that's a lot. I'll let you do the maths. Because I can't. In my head. Because I got a B in GCSE maths. Now everything so far has been pretty bad. But actually the government says that with a third runway at Heathrow, they'll actually reduce carbon dioxide emissions in other parts of the economy. Which is pretty good. Now, alternatives to Heathrow. The first one is expanding Gatwick. Us as a team believe expanding Gatwick would be quite good, as Gatwick sits in a quite large field with only Crowley to the south. Between Gatwick and Crowley is a lot of space. This space lends itself to a new runway, a full-length runway which could be used for short-haul and long-haul flights, not to mention a configuration when on one runway planes will take off and another runway planes will land. This maximises efficiency instead of just expand, which is what seems to be happening at Heathrow. A lot of you may be thinking the idea of a Boris Island is totes amazeballs. Actually it's not. Building a whole new island in the Thames estuary. This would be called Boris Island probably because it was his idea. Now this seems all well and good, although a Boris Island would actually intrude on up to 5 conservation areas as well as disturbing marine life. It's a good idea in theory because Kansai International Airport, which services Osaka in Japan, is built in an artificial island. However, in England we have a few issues, especially in the Thames estuary, such as the sunken American warship which contains a bucket load of explosives, which is pretty bad for planes that want to ditch Hudson Styley. An alternative to Heathrow, the Boris Island and expanding Gatwick would actually be a new high-speed rail line between London, Birmingham and extending to Manchester and the north of England. This would cost a lot of money, but would actually reduce the strain on London Heathrow as there wouldn't need to be as many short-haul flights. One of the busiest routes London Heathrow caters for is London to Manchester. A high-speed rail line between London and Manchester will relieve this pressure. Trains will be travelling at up to 250 miles per hour, so in no way will it be as slow. When you consider how trains will be going centre to centre, this isn't much slower than an airplane. Now, the question is, do we really need expansion? London Heathrow is already the biggest and probably best airport in the world. Now, 1 in 5 international flights already lands in Heathrow. Would it be so bad if we didn't expand and let other cities take up the extra traffic? London Heathrow is and forever will be an international airport. There will still be jobs, there will still be planes and holiday makers. Do we really need expansion? Do we?
The economic case for a third runway at Heathrow Airport is at first glance very clear-cut. BAA estimates over £100 billion generated for the economy as a whole and the creation of 70,000 to 150,000 local jobs. The British Chambers of Commerce estimate £30 billion for the economy, and they also reckon that every year we delay expansion of Heathrow, we lose £1 billion. The government of the day, of course, however, recognised that BAA and big business have a vested interest in presenting positive economic figures. So the basis for economic expansion comes largely from the Department for Transport's 2003 White Paper, which is just a sort of government report, on the future of air transport in the United Kingdom, which comes out in favour of airport expansion, with Heathrow being a key airport to expand. In 2006, a Greater London Authority commissioned economic study found an alarming amount of poor methodology which artificially increases the economic benefits. For instance, the benefits and costs of expansion are calculated up to 30 years after the last investment in expansion at all of the airports they looked at from a period of 2000 to 2060, even though the various options will have different opening dates at different airports, which is against the Department for Transport's own guidelines of a 60-year appraisal from date of opening. In plain English, that means having a fixed appraisal period will artificially reduce the case of expansion at Gatwick and other airports, as it would open later, and thus benefits calculated over a short period of time, so artificially increasing expansion case for Heathrow. The Department for Environment, Transport and the Regions was also very optimistic in regards to both passenger numbers and air transport movements, which is just a technical term for number of planes. So that's the government department. They predicted 2.6 to 3.9% annual growth from 2003 to 2025, whereas Eurocontrol, that's the European Organisation for the Safety of Air Navigation, only predicted 1.6 to 1.9%, so that's 2.6 to 3.9 compared to 1.6 to 1.9. The white paper also assumed that airfares will drop by 1% a year, with fuel prices stabilising about $25 a barrel, and bearing in mind that this was written in 2003 but given a green light in 2009, even though that paper saying oil prices are going to, or fuel prices will rise at $25 a barrel seems so outdated. Not to mention that aircraft fuel is VAT free and also heavily subsidised. Well, another thing that the economic study from GLA looked at was other options to expansion and make better use of existing capacity at Heathrow, such as load factor on aeroplanes. An increase to an average of 85% load factor would increase capacity by 9 million passengers a year. Increasing the aircraft size increases the number of potential passengers to 32 million at Heathrow. Now, one absolutely key point about positive economic findings is that the majority of economic benefits come from the wider area and not the immediate local one. This means that expansion at any airport, any southeast airport, would have the same impact on employment for the southeast and London as a whole. The immediate West London economy is the only area that would suffer from lack of Heathrow expansion. For the regional, national economies, equal benefits would be brought whether expansion occurs at Heathrow or any other airport. Another key point that is actually made in the white paper is this, and it says, quote, "Our assessment suggests that the greatest economic benefits are obtained by providing capacity in locations which are convenient for as much as possible of the total demand. That is better achieved by a more dispersed pattern of capacity than by concentrating all additional capacity at one location." This suggests that there wouldn't actually be a specific need to increase capacity at Heathrow in order for it to maintain its hub role, which is sort of a really key point, because that's one of the massive arguments. Oh, we need Heathrow as the hub, but even the white paper was saying not necessarily. I think on basis, the economic argument isn't whether or not airport expansion brings positive economic benefits, it's whether do you actually need the expansion to occur at Heathrow Airport in form of a third runway. In my opinion, and I think what the facts also present, is that you don't need the expansion to be at Heathrow. It can be at any local southeast regional airport, although even if this did highlight the paper that if capacity was actually constrained in the southeast, that would require a redistribution through the rest of the country, possibly helping to bridge north-south divide. Thank you.